It's October 3rd.
Oh my god, guys, it's Columbus Day.
Don't you mean Indigenous Peoples Day? I can't believe that we actually recognize a holiday for that genocidal bastard.
What? I used to celebrate the crap out of Columbus Day.
Why the hell would you do that? Dude didn't even discover America, and not to mention he was like basically the grandfather of the Western slave trade and imperialism. Do you guys remember the shit he wrote in that letter to Luis de Sandoval?
You call this part of India San Salvador, and I take possession of it in the name of the King and Queen of Spain.
He even told the dude in that letter that the natives didn't matter. I already understood sufficiently from the other Indians, whom I had already taken, that this land was nothing but an island. What a prick! And even worse, in the other letter we read, the one to the king and queen, he tried to make it seem like he was treated so terribly, going on about the unmerited wrong that I have suffered. No. I refuse to even acknowledge this bullshit holiday.
Yeah, there's so many people that deserve their own holiday.
Yeah, we should celebrate John Winthrop Day instead.
Winthrop? That guy was an asshole!
Yeah, but you can see his influence in the works of like future writers and even into modern times.
While the Puritans wouldn't exactly win any awards for having fun, they would certainly win for their love of hard work and community. In his sermon, A Model of Christian Charity, John Winthrop established the moral rules that would keep the Puritan community together in the new land. In speaking of the moral law of mercy, Winthrop says, "This law requires two things. First, that every man afford his help to another in every want or distress. Secondly, that he performed this out of the same affection which makes him careful of his own goods." This idea of community not only helped to keep the Puritans together, but also influenced the way that the future America would view community life. Arguably, the most memorable lines of his sermon deal with the ideas of destiny and superiority. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a byword through the world. This idea can clearly be seen again in the writings of the Revolution, and especially in Manifest Destiny and the Expansion of America. We see the influence of Puritan ideas like hard work, community, and frugality brought up again in writers like Anne Bradstreet, Crevecoeur, Thomas Paine, and Benjamin Franklin. The fact that the ideas of one man could have such an influence on the future moral and political ideals of the nation clearly shows that he deserves to have his own holiday.
I think Winthrop deserves its own holiday because of the influence he had on the later generations, especially people like Benjamin Franklin, who's basically considered the runaway heir of the Puritans anyway.
Franklin?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, okay. I know that he invented the stove and was a founding father and all. He was a big philanthropist, he invented a lot of things, but he just looks like a pedophile. If he approached you in public, would you not run for your life?
Here's another 90-second history report.
He was famous as any president, yet never elected to public office. He's Benjamin Franklin, the multifaceted founding father. Born in Boston in 1706, the 17-year-old Franklin headed to Philadelphia to make his mark. While there, he started our first lending library, but his true literary achievement was publishing Poor Richard's Almanac. Using the pen name Richard Saunders, he wrote clever commentary that is still quoted today. Franklin invented the bifocals, the glass harmonica, the Franklin stove, and the lightning rod. And yes, his research on electricity really did involve a kite flying experiment. As a delegate from Pennsylvania, he proudly signed the Declaration of Independence. Franklin was opposed to the bald eagle as our nation's symbol. He thought the turkey was a better fit. He was an ambassador to France and England. He served as the first postmaster general and formed the first volunteer fire company. His name has even become a reference for wealth, since he appears on the $100 bill. So here it is in a nutshell. He came to Philly and made a name. Inventions in politics gained him much fame. His experiments were shocking. His writings were bright. He admired the turkey, and his pictures are still liked.
That's Benjamin Franklin in 90 seconds.
Honestly, I kind of agree with Elena. I think that Benjamin Franklin just looks like a fat Doc Brown weirdo. But Thomas Jefferson, what about him? He was a real man's man.
Okay, so in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with inherent and inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And I just think that's really hypocritical because the guy owns slaves, and he also, like, there's DNA evidence that he had a child with one of his slaves. And maybe you guys don't know this, but he wanted to include language in the Declaration of Independence to get rid of slavery, but he was shot down. So I'm really confused about Thomas Jefferson. I mean, he was such a hypocrite. He wanted to free slaves and he wanted to sleep with them, obviously, but then later he would say that he doesn't see them as equal. So what is up with that? The guy's a hypocrite. I mean, yeah, he's the third president of the United States, and yeah, he's this great patron of the arts, but when it boils down to it, he was a hypocrite. And also, he wasn't too nice to Phyllis Wheatley. You know, he said he enjoyed her poetry, but then he said that, you know, people of her color and her gender, that they just had no business writing poetry because they were too oppressed. And it's just like, come on, dude. Can you not be a hypocrite?
Yeah, that dude was a total asshole.
I think Phyllis Wheatley is a good choice. I mean, she deserves her own holiday because of what she accomplished.
It all started in 1761 when she was around 7 years old. She was kidnapped against her will in Senegal, Africa, put on a slave ship with hundreds of other African slaves, male, female, and were brought to Boston, Massachusetts. Many slave ships had the capacity of about 562 slaves at a time, so that meant Phyllis and all the other slaves were kept below deck, jam-packed, uncomfortably, for long periods in these types of ships. That also meant no fresh air, no bathrooms, you just went where you lay, because every slave was chained and laid down in stacked rows in these ships. Unlike the adults, Phyllis was too young to endure grueling slave work, so in Boston she was bought at a slave auction by John Wheatley and his wife Susanna, who were looking for a domestic house servant. The Wheatleys educated Phyllis, encouraged her to write poetry, and by the age of 12, she had her first poem published. When she reached early adulthood, that's when she started getting recognition of her work. Although many people didn't believe a slave could write so well, let alone learn anything at all, she really defied the odds and proved no matter what skin color you are, anything is possible. She also had to defend her authorship of her poetry in court in 1772 because colonists found it difficult to believe it was her work. Emancipated due to her poetry success, she married a free man named John Peters, and they had 3 kids who all died in infancy, and her husband abandoned her before the birth of their 3rd child. Her life has gone from downhill to uphill, back to downhill. She's a perfect example of someone who achieved the American dream, who went from nothing to something. Phyllis was the first African American woman to get her work published in the 19th century and really opened a lot of new doors for African American literature writers. She's a great representation of social change, and she proved that African Americans can be innovative, knowledgeable, and talented, just as any other human. Some of her famous poems were On Being Brought from Africa to America, To His Excellency General Washington, and On Imagination. Phyllis died in Boston in 1784 at the age of 31, but has left behind her work for others to be inspired and motivated to go after something or continue doing something that you love. And that's why I believe Phyllis Wheatley deserves her own holiday.
I don't think that Phyllis Wheatley would be the worst person to have her own holiday, but I definitely think that Frederick Douglass would be a better choice. And I already feel that the tensions are super high in here. It's making me nervous. So let's just take a break and watch this video, guys.
Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist, and he believed it is morally wrong to have slavery. And people were like, hey, Lincoln, this guy's talking a good game. You should meet with him. And Lincoln wasn't a douchebag. He's like, okay, I'll meet with him. Frederick Douglass comes to the White House. Senator Pomeroy is like, da-da-da, Abraham Lincoln, let me introduce you to Frederick Douglass, a black former slave, a good black man who has some speeches. He would like to talk to you. I'm not being prejudiced. He's black, I'd like to let you know. And he was asking Frederick Douglass, what do I do about slavery? What do I do about the black population? And Frederick Douglass comes over to him, he's like, well, okay, Abraham Lincoln, I am Frederick Douglass. I am a former slave and he's like, shh, I get it. I know who you are. It's been explained to me. I've been following your career forever. Be quiet. I'm into it. Like, let's talk. He's like, guess what, Abraham Lincoln? I have to tell you 3 things. Blacks should fight in the war, too. Black soldiers who do fight in the war should get equal pay as whites. 3, if they're prisoners of war, don't fucking kill them. And Lincoln's like, yeah, I think we can do this, but I just want to let you know that I'm just into preserving the Union.
But really, on a more serious note, if anyone deserves their own holiday, it's Frederick Douglass. America was founded on freedom and the idea that every person deserves certain inalienable rights. Douglass not only fought for his rights and the slaves similar to him, but he fought for anyone who needed it, anyone who was being denied their freedom. And I think that that is what makes up a true American. Someone who can escape slavery and return as a leader and a hero to anyone in need.
You guys know who really deserves their own holiday? RWE.
Right-wing extremists?
No. Those guys get enough media coverage as it is. I'm talking about Ralph Waldo Emerson.
You mean that hippie hack? He was a loser.
I don't believe in conformity. I'm not a fan of slavery. I hang out with Henry Thoreau. I think women's a fucking joke.
You didn't even ask my permission, bro.
I'm a giant eyeball, a big fucking giant eyeball. I'm a giant eyeball. Call me Ralph. I went to Harvard, yeah, I'm real smart. I think nature is one of the hard. Tried to tell that to Phi Beta Kappa. American scholars with their heads up their asses.
Pretentious douchebags.
I'm a giant eyeball, a big fucking giant eyeball. I'm a giant eyeball. Call me Ralph. Misunderstood. I swear to God, I'd rather live in the woods. Hate you all, and I hope you choke. Self-reliance, that is not a joke.
All right. So who are we gonna pick?
Yeah, who should have their own holiday?
Well, Winthrop, obviously.
Okay, we discussed Winthrop enough. What about? I don't know. I have no new ideas.
Me either.
Wait, are you filming us, Sequoia?
Sequoia!
What the hell?
Bitch.
So, what have we learned today, guys? I mean, what do we think? What's the consensus here?
Well, I don't think anybody deserves their own holiday. Everybody pretty much sucks.
Batman!
Yes.